So today we're going to take out the alternator and replace it in a 2005 Toyota Camry. This is the 4-cylinder 2AZ FE engine. It's a pretty straightforward process, so we're not going to make it any longer than it needs to be. But basically you have to just take out the battery, take out this air filter, and then you can access the alternator. So first we're just going to take off the battery. On this car the ground is like a 10mm, and then this one is like what, 12? It's 14 or something. Sounds a little bigger for some reason. Your car might be different, but just take this off. Alright, next we're gonna have to remove like this little seating bracket thing for the battery. So I think this is just a 10mm bolt right here. And then this, you actually, I'm just gonna be able to loosen it by hand because it wasn't tightened all the way down. But normally this, you wouldn't be able to just use like a socket because it might not reach unless you have like a longer one. So you could just use a wrench also. And then now basically we just take out the battery. So next we have to remove this air filter. So you can start by taking off this little clip right here. It's a plastic clip, so be careful, it might be brittle. You don't want to break it. And then you want to take this one out too. Alright, now that one, those are both out. And then you want to take out this screw right here. You can use Phillips, or you can also use a flathead if you can get in there, or it can also be used as you can use a 10mm for it as well. Okay, after this is loosened, basically we have two 10mm right here, one over here, and then one on the other side in the back, right over here. You want to loosen those. Alright, that one's loose. Okay, so I had to get a longer ratcheting wrench. Alright, so now that these two are loosened, we see that this can come off. It kind of rotates around here. So we want to also remove this hose from this right here. So carefully, just kind of let it off. You want to be careful because these hoses can get older and brittle and crack. And if it does crack, if it is that old, then you might just have to replace it, but that becomes a different job. Alright, so I got that separated. So I just kind of lifted that up and then released it from this right here. So now I have this off. Reset it to the side. And then I remove the engine air filter. And then now if you look inside here, you'll see 3 more 10mm. And I'm just going to have to take those out. So now I think I have to take these out next. So these are 2 10mm, and it's basically with this little metal bracket right here. Now we're going to take off 2 10mm here and also here. That's just connecting the rest of this to the engine air filter. Alright, so now I just have to release this electrical wire connection from this plastic little housing right here. So I'm going to use a flathead to release right over here. And then once it gets released, I can just remove the wire and set it aside. And then now I think this should be able to come out. And then now you can see that the starter is right here. And so we're going to go ahead and take it out. All you have to do is remove these clips right here. And then you'll have, I think this is like a 13 or a 14 millimeter on this side. And then also one right here on this side, right there. Alright, so let's take off this clip. Alright, that's out. Now when I pull this back, you kind of see that there's a another nut right here that I have to take out. So this is a, what is it, 13 millimeter. There we go. Just take it off and loosen it. Alright. Take that out. Now for these other two, they basically hold the starter to the engine. So I'm going to use a breaker bar for this and a 14 millimeter socket. So you can see that it's starting to kind of come loose and shake. So basically after I let these screws out, it's basically not going to be supported anymore. So I have to make sure I'm supporting it with my hands. Alright, and then you have it out. So as you can tell, this one's actually a pretty new starter. So for the purposes of this video, we can pretend this is the old starter, and then we're going to put in a new starter, quote unquote, and you'll see that in a minute. Alright, so now I'm going to take the new starter and basically just feed it in. There we go. And then line it up with those holes, and I'm going to just screw those in. So I'm going to do it by hand first, just to make sure I don't cross thread anything. Alright, so now I'm just going to tighten it with the socket. And then I'm just going to finish it with the breaker bar. I can't find my torque wrench, so I don't know the actual torque specs for this one, but I recommend that you actually use a torque wrench and torque it right instead of just using a breaker bar. But this is better than nothing. So, I'm sorry for the guy mowing his lawn. I know it's making a lot of background noise. Alright, now I'm just going to put this electrical connection back on right here, and then screw this part back on. I don't think this one has to be on too tight, so I just gave it like a turn, made it snug. Now you're basically done with the alternator part. The rest of it is just putting everything else back in. So we're going to start with that air filter part first. So I want to make sure this bottom hose gets connected up with this one right here. And then these line up. And then so do the 3 10mm around here. First I put these two in. Alright, so now I'm going to put this metal bracket part back in. So that's going to line up these 2 screw holes right here. And then this one right here is going to line up with this one that's inside this little box. First I'm just going to put them in by hand. And maybe if you had some rust like this, you'd want to take the time to just kind of wipe it away and let it thoroughly dry. Now before I tighten those all the way, I'm also going to put these 3 10mm in here by hand, just because I want these to line up, and this is going to rely on the position of this. Alright, now I can tighten them all down. Okay. So now that this part's back in place, we can put the top part back on. So now I'm just going to go ahead and put the air filter down. This one actually says up, and this is the front. So it helps you kind of remember the orientation. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this part down. And I want to basically get it underneath right here so it can still rotate. And then I'm going to hook it up to this little hose connection. Now before I forget, I also want to take this electrical clip, and then I can put it back on that little harness, that little holder. Clip that back in. And then from there I can plug these parts back in. Alright. And then I'll have to screw down this right here, and there's one in the back. And also don't forget to tighten up this little hose clamp. Alright, so that's on pretty tight. So the sunlight's kind of coming in here to make the lighting look a little weird. Sorry for that in advance. So we're going to go ahead and put this little battery cover thing, not a cover, it's a place for it to sit. I'm going to put that back, and I'm going to put the battery back on top of there. Probably should have moved these wires out the way first. Okay, so we have it seated properly. So I'm going to put this little battery holder part back in. So I can have this go underneath this. And make sure you're just going to take this hook part and you put it into the hole behind it. So, alright. And then, oops, this came out of the hole. There we go. So then I'm going to take the screw for this side. I'm just going to tighten this one by hand. Okay. And then I'll take the other one for here. I'll also hand tighten it. So now this one's tightened down, and with this one you can screw it down if you want to. I usually just finish it by hand, so I can also take it off that way by hand easier. It still holds the battery tightly in place without shaking it. And at this point you're basically done. You just want to put your two terminals back on. Alright, so now at this point you just want to tighten these back up. Be careful not to have metal touch this and this at the same time. Okay. And that's basically it. You finished installing an alternator on your Toyota Camry.